Circuit, we're going to have to look at that. Because every case, no matter where it is, they file it practically. I mean practically. For all intents and purposes. They file it in what's called the Ninth Circuit. This was an Obama judge. And I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen like this anymore.
Do you feel that the Supreme Court will be involved in the immigration policy of the United States?
I think certainly. I think they won't be able to avoid it. Whenever courts and presidents will always have conflicts, whenever a president invokes national security concerns, which President Trump has partially done in relation to the current immigration disputes. That's always an area of tension between a court and an executive when they're trying to resolve where the boundaries between each other's role are in national security type questions.
The Supreme Court in Washington will deal with this issue of immigration from the point of view of human rights, maybe.
I think they will, recognizing that the court is usually quite aware of the limitations of its role when you're in international law and the president is making noises about national security. So the court will balance its human rights concerns with these other types of concerns about its proper role in the institution.
But the Supreme Court in America is highly politicized because of the appointment system.
We have a very, very public appointment system, and that is somewhat unique in the world. And I think it's not a bad thing, though, because when you give courts as much power as we give our Supreme Court, and when they sit for life, our judges are not term limited, they sit for as long as they want to, there needs to be some public accountability over the exercise of that power. And our confirmation process, with all of its flaws, and it certainly doesn't do everything well, but with all of its flaws, it's the only point where we have that accountability before we let the justices take that bench and sit for the rest of their lives. So it's an important moment.
Do you approve of the secretive type of appointments in Israel?
I think it depends on what role your court plays. If your court is being a very powerful court.
Very powerful.
Yeah, and if it's using that power aggressively, if it's striking down a lot of legislation, then I think the public accountability through a more open process becomes more important. I think whether that would work for Israel is a choice that I think you will work out as your court either assumes more power or steps back a bit from some recent controversies.
Do you feel that President Trump is impeachable?
We don't have, as of yet, a legal standard for impeachment.
I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
You may remember when Bill Clinton was impeached in the 1990s. He was impeached by the House of Representatives, although not convicted by the Senate, so he didn't have to leave office. And there was a question then whether or not courts should determine what is an impeachable offense and what is not. And Bill Clinton, of course, was accused of committing perjury under oath about an extramarital affair. And there was a question of whether that should be an impeachable offense and whether the court should decide. It never got to the court, but the consensus in the Academy was that the Supreme Court would not answer that question, that they would say it's up to the political branches to decide what constitutes an impeachment.
We know, at least this is the public expressions of the Democrats in the House, they want to start an impeachment process of President Trump.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen right away. But if it does, the impeachment is a two-step process. So the House impeaches, but then the Senate has to convict. And interestingly, do you know who oversees the process in the Senate if the Senate is trying an impeachment?
Chief Justice Roberts.
Chief Justice John Roberts.